Have you ever wondered why people tend to obsess over certain individuals yet don't seem to show the same level of interest for other people? Well, you might be surprised to hear that it's not actually about the person. It's not about the person, it's about that person's behavior. Specifically, obsession happens when somebody shows interest in you and then goes cold. So either they withdraw or at least they become somewhat inconsistent in their behavior. Now, I'll tell you exactly how you can use this information in your dating life or how you should be using it, but let's first take a look at the science. Now, the scientific findings here are very interesting. Scientists did brain scans of humans that had just gone through a breakup. And what you expect to find is that these humans are grieving. So the loss region of the brain gets activated. But that's not at all what scientists found. What scientists found was something very similar to what they find when they look at the brains of cocaine addicts that are in withdrawal. What they found was the reward circuits of the brain that were interrupted. So your relationship, basically similar to cocaine, causes dopamine release in the brain. So the dopamine spikes whenever you're with your partner or whenever you enjoy being with your partner. When your partner is taken away, a bit like when you take the cocaine away from a drug addict, what happens is that the brain doesn't get these dopamine spikes anymore, so it starts chasing them. And that is what creates the obsession. You chase, you want your partner back, you want your cocaine, so to speak. Your brain goes into pursuit mode. And that is the obsession at play. Now, the interesting thing from a scientific perspective is it doesn't only apply to breakups. When you meet somebody, and that person shows a certain level of interest, but then they go cold. They just stop responding. Or they go icy, they reject you. Or maybe they don't reject you fully, but they become somewhat inconsistent in their interest and you don't really know what's happening. Now, again, your brain had that nice reward of the person showing interest in you, the person you like showing interest in you, and all of a sudden it's taken away. So what does your brain do? It goes into chasing mode. You feel that again as obsession, and you're very surprised as to why exactly am I obsessing over this person? I barely know them. Why am I so fucking obsessed with them? Now, what you'd think is that if you're being inconsistent with how you show interest in another person, that would make the other person lose interest in you. But apparently from a scientific perspective, it's the exact opposite. If you show somebody too much that you like them, if you make yourself too available, if you make it seem like, oh, they already have you and it's all said and done, well, from a scientific perspective, that actually makes them lose interest in you. And we can even put this into a formula. If you want obsession, we need two things. We need something that the person finds desirable, aka the reward, something that they want to chase. And then we need to introduce a little bit of uncertainty as to whether they can have that reward. The interesting thing here is that if you're still watching this video, there's a very high likelihood that you already are the reward. You're already successful, in good shape, you know how to dress, you know how to appear in public. So hypothetically, you are already the reward. But in a way, there's a very high likelihood that you're making yourself too available. You're making it seem too much like she already has you. And that is exactly what's making her lose interest. Now, the funny thing is, the more successful you are, the more likely it is that you face this problem. And here's why. If you're a man and you're successful, then at some point you learn to solve problems, right? That's as easy as it is. You solve problems, you get paid for it. The thing is, when you started facing problems in your dating life, you approach dating the same way. You start learning techniques, maybe went to seminars, booked programs, and all of these aim at one thing. They aim at teaching you to flirt with women. And what flirting essentially is, it's artificially introducing a bit of friction. Why? Well, because when you introduce friction, what happens is that dopamine reward in the brain gets triggered and the other person starts chasing the reward. That's why we do things like teasing or challenging the other person. It does the same thing. It triggers that dopamine chase in the brain. Now, here's the thing. If you apply one of these techniques and the goal of this technique is to trigger that feeling of uncertainty, the idea, of course, makes sense. But when the other person notices that you're doing something to make them more interested, then they immediately know that you're interested in them. So it has the opposite effect. You're doing something that's intended at showing that you're not interested, but because they notice it's a technique, they realize that, oh, this guy must be extremely interested in me because he uses some technique to get me interested. So the fact that you're using a technique is what gives it away. Now you might say, well, if you get good at using techniques, nobody's going to notice. But the problem is that the subconscious mind is extremely good at picking up on subtleties. And especially very attractive women that are used to being hit on all the time, they are acutely aware of other people using techniques or using things to get their interest or doing things with a certain outcome in mind. So the fact that you're using a technique is something that her subconscious mind is going to pick up on, and maybe she won't even be able to say what it is that's feeling off, but she will notice that something is feeling off. Because of that, she will not be interested in pursuing things further. And that is why this happens quite often to people, the more successful they are. And the way I think about it is this. When you learn techniques for dating, what you're doing, again, in terms of problem solving, is you're trying to become the better player. You're learning more techniques. You're trying to become better at getting her attention, at making her laugh. You're trying to become the better player. But what you should actually be doing is becoming the game that she wants to play. So going away from optimizing to play the game and becoming the game that women want to play. So become the dopamine chase for her. Now, how do you do this? And I'll use the example of James Bond here. James Bond is not always the best example for dating because James Bond is a very unreal character. He never does any real outreach. You know, he rarely goes over and talks to women, but he does the two things that cause obsession really well. Number one, he is a reward worth chasing. A very attractive, handsome man that is obviously successful and has his stuff together, courageous, confident, eloquent, all of it. At the second time, he's also extremely busy, emotionally not always super available. So it's this reward, the attractive guy, and it creates the chase because he's somewhat unavailable, somewhat mysterious. But he's not faking it, it's just who he is based on his job, based on his life, based on his lifestyle. So what does it look like in practice for you? I'll give you 5 behaviors that you can implement that if you've been watching my videos for quite some time, hopefully you've already started to implement. If you haven't started yet, if you're struggling with it, if you need my help, my link to my calendar is down below. Feel free to reach out anytime. So here we go, in no particular order, the 5 behavioral traits that you can and should implement right away if you want to become more of that character that creates obsession in other people's mind. First one is going to be becoming less approval seeking. Rather than doing things for other people's approval, start doing what you want to do. Whenever you do something and the thought pops up in your mind, I hope she likes it, I hope that makes her laugh, that means that you're hoping for her approval. So whenever you're saying something and you hear that thought, leave it there. Try to say things that make you laugh, not caring about whether she laughs, but whether she finds it funny, about whether she's okay with it. It should just be what you want to say, what you find funny. And whenever you offend somebody, take a step back, say you're sorry. That's fine. And if you wonder what it looks like when you actually master this part of your life, then that is a guy that takes up space, that doesn't mind sharing his opinion, that doesn't mind being himself and maybe being a little bit playful or being a little bit silly at times if that's who he is. He doesn't mind cracking a joke that maybe somebody doesn't find funny. That's what the outcome looks like when you stop caring for other people's approval. So that's what you should aim for. Now, the second element I'll share, I want you to take to heart, because many people think, well, I need to master this internal side of everything and then people will start flocking towards me. There's an entire industry on the internet revolving around the idea of you just optimizing your looks, becoming the most attractive version of yourself, and women will just give you these invitations. Thing is, you cannot rely on this. You still need to realize that you're the man, you're the one who will have to take the initiative and sometimes go over. Sometimes just say hi to somebody that you find attractive and maybe be okay with fucking it up, be okay with getting rejected, be okay with things not going anywhere. You need to be willing to take the initiative. And that's where James Bond is very unreal, because he rarely actually walks over and says hi to somebody. And you might feel like this is a bit of a contradiction because you don't want to show too much interest. But here's the difference. You don't want to go to somebody and seem like you want them and you need them for yourself, otherwise things are bad. But you want to give both of you an opportunity for something to happen. And the difference here is that you want the other person, but you don't need them. right? It's not like I want you, and if I don't have you, then my life ends or the world ends or I'm going to be sad. No, I want you, and if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. The third one is never reacting when she gives you shit, right? If she says something kind of challenging you, if she does something that triggers you, don't become reactive, don't become needy. Take a step back, think about it, smile at it, say something silly back, re-engage, or maybe just ignore it and smile. Sometimes that's all it takes. The fourth one is implement genuine standards and genuine boundaries. If you know who you are, if you know what you want, and if you know what you're willing to put up with or tolerate in your life, that becomes inherently attractive because you are this entity that moves through time and space, knowing who he is, knowing where he's going, knowing what he's willing to have in his life. And when somebody doesn't comply with this or doesn't fit in there or does something that doesn't work for you, then you will say it. Now, most men cannot do it. Most men are too scared to, again, offend somebody, to lose somebody. But being willing to stand up for who you are and what you believe in always means that you have to be willing to lose other people for the benefit of yourself. So you value yourself more than you value anybody else. And that is attractive. Again, it is actually one of the most attractive things you can do in life, having a strong sense of self and a strong sense of identity. And the fifth and final thing, and I've already started talking about it right now, is your willingness to walk away. The moment you start prioritizing your own peace of mind, the moment you start prioritizing what you want and who you are over everybody else, that's the moment when you start becoming okay with the idea of walking away. When you start being okay with the idea of, well, I'm fine either way. And rather than putting up with too much shit from somebody, rather than putting up with somebody overstepping my boundaries, I'm just going to leave. The moment you're willing to do that, and that becomes clear from how you communicate, that again will become so attractive to most women simply based on the fact that that shows that you're not needing anybody, that you're not willing to compromise for your own values. You're not willing to compromise who you are for them. Now, just to summarize this is not about tactics. If you've listened to this the right way, you will realize that this is really about changing who you are at the core. It's not like a technique that you use, a certain line that you say. It's really who you have to become as a man. That should be your goal, becoming that person that lives that life, that is that character, that has that level of attractiveness to him. Because that thing that triggers obsession, that dopamine loop, it can't really be triggered through fake activities. Yeah, you might get lucky now and then. You might have a technique that works now and then. And they work more often than they don't. But if you can become the real thing, it's so much more powerful than using a technique. Once you are that reward and at the same time you live life true to yourself, you will immediately align with these 5 elements that we talked about today. And by aligning with them, you will immediately become a little less available and therefore more worthy of the chase. I'm going to leave you with this. If you watched this far, thanks for watching. If you're not subscribed to the channel yet, hit the subscribe button. Any questions, hit me in the comment box, and I'll see you in my next video.